In the south of Portugal, in the small coastal village of Praia da Luz, everything looked idyllic in early May 2007. Narrow streets, white houses with tiled roofs, bright sun and the ocean, which seemed to lull the residents with its noise. This place seemed made for a quiet family holiday. On one of those spring days, a British family checks into the local Ocean Club resort. The husband and wife are both doctors, intelligent and respected people. They have 3 children with them, 1 older and 2 younger, twins. They are not alone. They are vacationing with several other families, friends with whom they have had long-standing friendships. The days passed quietly, walks on the beach, games by the pool, dinners with friends. The parents enjoyed a rare opportunity to breathe, trusting the resort environment and considering it safe. No one could have imagined that in this place the countdown to the most mysterious and scary night of their lives was already underway. May 3, 2007 began like all the previous days. Sun, children playing, laughter and anticipation of a quiet evening. Closer to night, the parents put the little ones to bed. The eldest daughter, a 3-year-old girl with big eyes and light hair, climbed under the blanket in her room. The twins fell asleep next to each other in neighboring beds. That evening, Madeleine's parents, as usual, decided to have dinner with their friends. It was a group of close families who were vacationing together. They chose the restaurant Tapas Bar, located literally 50 meters from their apartment. The adults could see the apartment windows right from their table. Leaving the children in the room did not seem irresponsible, but rather part of the usual vacation scheme. The parents had agreed in advance. Every 20 to 30 minutes, one of the adults would get up from the table and check on the kids. This gave them the illusion of security and the opportunity to relax a little. The evening passed quietly. Laughter at the table, glasses of wine, a light breeze from the ocean. Around 9:30 p.m., the father looked into the room. Everything was quiet. The 3 children were sleeping peacefully. No alarm signals. After a while, closer to 10 p.m., it was the mother's turn. She entered the apartment and noticed the window was wide open. The curtains were fluttering in the wind. Her heart sank. She rushed to her daughter's bed and saw an empty space. The girl was gone. What began as an ordinary vacation evening, in an instant turned into a nightmare that has not ended to this day. Kate's scream as she returned from the apartment shocked everyone. She ran out of the apartment screaming, "They've taken her! Madeleine has disappeared!" The words instantly echoed throughout the restaurant and the complex. The parents rushed back to the room in panic. The bed was empty. The window was wide open. The small toy that Madeleine usually slept with lay on the sheets, as if abandoned in a hurry. The first impulse of the adults was to look for the child themselves. Friends and employees of the complex grabbed flashlights and began to comb the courtyards, the pool, the garden, the streets around. Someone ran to the beach. Others looked into every corner, calling the girl by name. At that moment, no one thought about isolating the room or preserving traces. The doors remained open. People came in and out. The police were called almost immediately, but the arrival of law enforcement officers did not bring immediate clarity. The local police of the small resort town had no experience of dealing with kidnappings of this scale. They arrived and began questioning witnesses. But dozens of people had already been in the apartment, and possible evidence could have been destroyed. For the parents, the hours dragged on like an eternity. Kate and Jerry were torn between searching and despair. They shouted their daughter's name, looked into neighboring apartments, naively hoping that she might wake up and go looking for them herself. But everything pointed to the worst. A 3-year-old girl could not simply disappear on her own. By midnight, the search had become chaotic. It seemed that the entire village had risen to its feet. Residents, tourists, and employees of the complex combed the streets, but there was no result. With each passing minute, hope faded and fear grew stronger. It was these first hours that became fatal. Instead of turning the apartment into a carefully guarded crime scene, dozens of people were entering and leaving. The wind blew the curtains, possible fingerprints were erased by hand, and every extra minute worked against the investigation. That night, the world of one family collapsed, and with it, the belief that children are always safe with their parents collapsed. The investigation began with the most obvious questions. Could the girl have left the apartment herself? Maybe she went to look for her parents. But a 3-year-old child could not have gone far. The abduction version quickly became the main one. Interviews with neighbors showed that someone saw strange people near the complex. Others heard noise. Stories appeared about a man carrying a child in his arms, walking away into the darkness. But there was no evidence. At first, everyone saw Kate and Jerry McCann as grief-stricken parents who had lost their child. Their photos were splashed across the newspapers, their faces on the front pages. But as time went on, the girl was still missing, and that's when the investigation took an unexpected turn. The Portuguese police began to ask questions. Why was the window open as if it had been deliberately thrown open? Why were the curtains fluttering and there were almost no traces of strangers on the windowsill? Why did the neighbors hear loud screams and crying, not at the time of the abduction, but later when Kate discovered the loss? Investigators increasingly turned their attention to the parents. The officers began to think that what had happened could have been staged. Their suspicions were also fueled by certain details of the couple's behavior. The media picked up on the topic. Newspapers wrote about how the mother seemed too reserved and how the father spoke too calmly about the events of that night. Every gesture, every word was analyzed under a microscope. Where an ordinary person would see grief, the press and investigators saw coldness or unnaturalness. A few months after their disappearance, Kate and Jerry were officially declared arguidos, suspects in the case. It was a real blow. The parents, who had been screaming about a kidnapping from the first days, suddenly found themselves at the center of accusations. They began to be compared to other cases where it was the family that was hiding a terrible secret. The main argument of the investigation is dogs specially trained to find traces of blood and the smell of human decomposition. In the apartment and even in the family's rented car, the animals allegedly smelled disturbing traces. But there was no direct evidence, only interpretations. The world was divided into two camps. Some said, the parents of the victim, they can't be blamed, they are going through the worst thing imaginable. Others insisted, there are too many oddities, too many inconsistencies, and the hardest thing was that even years later, this shadow of suspicion never completely dissipated. Kate and Jerry were forced to live not only with the pain of loss, but also with the constant glances of people doubting their innocence. The story immediately spread beyond Portugal. British newspapers published new stories every day. The girl's photo flew around the world. After the first weeks of the investigation, it became clear that without an answer to the question, who could have taken the girl, the story would not move forward, and so the police and the media began to put forward more and more new versions, which constantly changed the focus of attention. At first, suspicion fell on random passers-by and local residents. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a man carrying a child in his arms near the apartments in the evening. Someone claimed to have seen strange people near the complex in the previous days. This version was supported by rumors that the south of Portugal in those years often attracted criminal groups and human traffickers. Later, police seriously considered the possibility that Madeleine might have been the victim of child abductions, a criminal network that specialized in selling babies abroad. The theory sounded like a nightmare, but it remained one of the most popular for a long time. It was supported by reports of a similar girl being seen in Morocco. Newspapers published photographs with blurred faces, speculated, but no evidence was ever found. There were other versions. Some investigators believed that it could have been an accident. For example, the girl could have died as a result of a fall or poisoning, and her parents or one of her friends allegedly tried to hide the truth. This version was especially actively promoted in the press at the time when Kate and Jerry themselves were made official suspects.
Did you kill your daughter?
No, never. And, there's nothing with any logic that could, you would have to start with why, how, when, who, and there's just simply, the answer to any of these things is there's nothing to suggest anything. So, no, that's an emphatic no.
In the following years, the circle of suspects only expanded. Several tourists came under suspicion. They were arrested, interrogated, but after a while, they were released. There was not enough evidence. In 2013, British police published new information. A group of thieves was operating in the south of Portugal, stealing from tourist resorts. Investigators suggested that one of them could have accidentally kidnapped the child or taken her for a specific purpose. And in 2020, the world was again shaken by the news. The main suspect was declared to be German citizen Christian Bruckner, a man with a criminal past, previously convicted of violence and pedophilia. At the time of his disappearance, he lived near the resort and allegedly bragged that he knew what happened to the girl. It seemed like the long-awaited breakthrough, but here, too, everything stalled. direct evidence of his guilt was never found. Each new version became a sensation. Each suspect's name exploded in the press, and each time the hope of finding the culprit turned into the same result: emptiness. This constant change of suspects made the case look like an endless labyrinth. There were too many doors, and each one turned out to be a dead end, and time passed inexorably. Madeleine's disappearance was more than just a family tragedy. It became a story that would live on in the news, on the front pages of newspapers, and on television for decades. After the first months of the investigation, it seemed that the case had reached a dead end. In July 2008, the Portuguese police officially removed the parents' status as suspects and closed the investigation. But even this decision did not bring peace. The rumors and accusations did not disappear. The McCann family did not give up. They hired private detectives, involved international organizations, traveled from country to country in search of traces of their daughter. Leaflets with her photo were distributed all over the world. It seemed that everyone had heard the name of little Madeleine. Time after time, new testimonies appeared. Someone claimed to have seen a similar girl in Morocco. Others spoke of meeting her at a train station in Spain. There were reports even from Australia and South America. Each new mention caused a wave of hope, and then the inevitable disappointment. Every year, on the anniversary of the disappearance, the British and Portuguese press recalled the story. People argued, was Madeleine alive? Was it possible that she had grown up somewhere under a different name, unaware of her past? Or was the truth much darker? The story wouldn't let go. Even 15 years later, Madeleine's photos, as she looked at age 3 and as she might look today, were printed all over the world. For some, it was a symbol of hope. For others, it was a symbol of how cruel and unfair the world can be. And perhaps the most terrifying part of this story was the realization that despite all the efforts, millions of dollars, the attention of Interpol, hundreds of hours of searching and investigating, the most agonizing question of this story is simple. Why, despite all the efforts, was the truth never found? The secret lies in the first hours after the disappearance. When Kate discovered the empty bed, the apartment instantly turned into a walk-through yard. Parents, friends, staff, everyone was rushing around looking for the girl. It got worse. The investigation went one way or another from the very beginning. The kidnapping version, then the staged version. Dogs that supposedly smelled blood, but without evidence. Suspicion of the parents who destroyed trust and wasted time. The press also exerted extreme pressure. Millions of eyes around the world followed every step of the investigators. Mistakes multiplied. Some newspapers blamed the parents, others, the police. Any new version was inflated to the scale of a sensation. As a result, the case looked more like a show than an investigation. But perhaps there is an even more terrifying truth. If the kidnapping did happen, it was planned in advance and professionally executed. That meant the chances of finding the girl were virtually non-existent from the start. That's why, despite hundreds of interviews, dozens of suspects, thousands of pages of reports, and millions of pounds spent on the investigation, the Madeleine McCann case remains unsolved. That night in Portugal, time seemed to stand still. A small resort village where everything seemed safe and predictable entered history forever. An ordinary family came here for a vacation, but instead found themselves at the center of the loudest and most mysterious mystery of the 21st century. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann was more than just a missing child case. It was a symbol of how fragile our security is, even in the places where we feel safe. It was a symbol of how a few minutes can change a life forever. Hundreds of people searched for her, millions followed her story, and even after all these years, the world still asks the same question: where is Madeleine? We will never know what happened beyond those windows or why that particular night turned out to be fatal. But Madeleine's memory remains alive. Her story reminds us that no one is immune, and the truth sometimes hides where you least expect it. And perhaps that is why we tell such stories. To remember, to learn from mistakes, to not let ourselves forget. If you've watched up to this point, it means you care about people's lives and the mysteries that remain unsolved. Subscribe to the channel to look for answers together, to be there when we sort out the most mysterious and dark cases, and so that such stories are not lost in time. Write in the comments what you think. Could Madeleine have been kidnapped, or is the truth hidden much closer than we are used to thinking? Your opinion is important, because only by discussing and asking questions can we get closer to the truth.